left in me. I thought to myself, maybe I have one badass spear left in me. Then I thought to myself, maybe I have one last devastating jackhammer in me. Brock Lesnar. Not only does that mean that you're next, but most importantly, it means, Brock Lesnar, you're last.
It is John Pollock, and as Wei Ting has set out on his month-long world tour, it is time to spin the wheel, and tonight we're going to make a deal with the one and only Brother Nate joining us here. Nate Milton is with us.
What is going on, Brother Pollock?
Oh, lots is going on, Mr. Milton. I have just watched my Blue Jays give up the final out in game number 3. They are now down 3-0 to the Cleveland Indians. It is not looking very bright for the Toronto Blue Jays in the postseason, Nate. As the king of sport, you are probably aware of this.
Yes, and I am aware that this might be bad news to our brothers and sisters north of the border, but shout out to Cleveland. It's been a banner year for Cleveland. Not only the Cavaliers, but the Indians are doing well. You got Stipe Miocic, and to a lesser extent, you got Dolph Ziggler and The Miz. So it's the new title town.
They clearly have had enough, whereas Toronto, well, I guess they're getting a main event that I think is a lot hotter after tonight's Raw than it was prior with the Survivor Series main event. We will get into that, but lots to discuss going into Raw Monday night, which, Nate, it was all built around Bill Goldberg's return. And before tonight's show, what was your level of interest of a Bill Goldberg return? He did not have the greatest run in the world. His last time in the WWE. Did this rematch excite you when you first heard?
No. The match itself is not something that really excites me, and even after tonight, I still don't know if it excites me, but the prospect of seeing Goldberg, that was a big hook for me tonight. Just seeing how he came out, seeing how the crowd reacted to him, and seeing how much time they would give him on the microphone. Those were things I was interested in.
Yes. All interesting how they would handle his return. And they ended up building the entire show around Bill Goldberg and airing different clips. So we're going to get right into it from Monday night in Denver, Colorado at the Pepsi Center. And we started off the show, Nate, immediately with highlights of Goldberg from WCW mixed in with clips from the video game and promoting his appearance. And then the show began with Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho coming out. There were big Y2J chants here. As you can see, the crowd very much getting behind Chris Jericho and this character. And I think, Nate, that's the direction they kind of want to be steering everyone towards. And the crowd is, to me, in sync with this storyline and where they want to be taking things.
Yeah, especially, when you talk about the entertainment aspect, and it's something you and Wade bring up every week, with the list and with him being, he's like the cool dad. He's somebody that used to be hot back in the day, and now he's still kind of clinging on to the coolness, or the perceived coolness. And I dug it, man. I think he's done a great job. Outside of my feelings about his match at WrestleMania, I've been thoroughly impressed with Jericho this last go round.
The AJ Styles match did not do it for Nate.
No, not the AJ Styles match, nor the tag team. But aside from that, I've been down with Y2J.
So they're out, and Owens just shuts down the chants. He says that Mick Foley has a vendetta against him. And then Chris Jericho says how everyone is talking about Hell in a Cell being this honor to be inside of the match. And it's not. It's a nail in your coffin. It's a violent match. It is evil. It's the match that ended Mick Foley's career. Well, I guess it ended one of his careers. He's since had many returns. But in folklore, this is the end of his career, was the Hell in a Cell in 2008. As Owens says that he is a thinking man's champion. He's not going to allow Hell in a Cell to shorten his career. And Jericho then said that he should have been in the match with a three-way, which you can see the look on Owens' face that he is just glad it is a singles match. He goes off listing all of his accolades, building up to, Nate, that he beat Austin and Rock in the same night. Bet you forgot that, didn't you? I don't feel Jericho can do any wrong at this point. It just seems like everything he is doing, it's just clicking so well and playing off of Owens. And he blames the officiating for last week's loss to Rollins, and he just builds it up and up to adding referee Rod Zapata to the list, which got the expected reaction.
Yeah, that whole thing was so good. Not just Jericho, but also Owens. And I love that Owens is the heel who has believable motivation and actually makes sense, because if this were quote unquote real sport, and let's say, let's use the NFL, because I've got Monday Night Football in the background, and it's a terrible game. The less said about that, the better. But let's say Roger Goodell designed a structure for the Super Bowl, and it was this big Thunderdome cage. And he's like, this is an honor to go in this cage. This is a blessing and a privilege to be in this cage. I would expect some of the players to be like, you know what? No, this is a damn shame, because you talk so much about concussions and the health of the athletes, and you're throwing us in this structure. And so I was 100% with KO on what he was saying right here, because in a storyline perspective, it makes sense. Like, where is the honor, especially for the cowardly heel champion? That's not something he wants to be a part of. Yeah,
and that was kind of a bit of a critique last week, I would say, when they're building up these different cell matches, and in particular the women, that they're not trying to sell kind of the violence of it. It's more that this is this incredible step forward for the women, that they are in a Hell in a Cell. And I think this promo, it was designed to, and they kind of did this with the Lita interviews as well, kind of getting across the actual match and why it's this important stipulation in the WWE. It's because of this. This is the ultimate cage match that they try and sell on you, and the most violent match theoretically that they can put on. And I think they were getting away from that.
So you mean we're really gonna have to talk about those Lita segments?
Oh, we will get to the Lita segments. Seth Rollins comes out. He's got this new shirt, one that I don't think either of us will be purchasing, that reads Seth freaking Rollins on the front. And he tells Jericho that he should add his scarf to the list, his rinky-dink tattoos, his haircut, his creepy mustache, and his trunks, which leads to him calling Chris Jericho Sparkle Crotch. The crowd then engaged in this Sparkle Crotch chant, and then brings up Owens watching him 2 weeks in a row delivering a pedigree to Jericho, as Owens just watched on, and Owens stated how one of them has to stay strong, and that led Rollins to make the conclusion that makes Jericho weak. And they argued about whether Owens should leave or not, because Jericho and Rollins set up a match with one another, and it ends with Jericho and Rollins hugging and Rollins going to the back. So this was our setup for a rematch from last week. And what did you think of this start to the show, Nate?
I thought 2/3 of it was good. I thought, KO and Jericho, they did their thing, and I love that they're still trying to portray themselves as best friends. I love that, if this were in the hands of lesser performers, we would already be at the turn. And so I'm glad, they're spacing this out. But with Rollins, I still don't get what he's supposed to be, and why I, as a viewer, am supposed to be cheering for him. Like, they still have not given me a valid reason to be behind this guy, other than he's going up against the big bad guy.
Yeah, it's definitely been a babyface turn that has not been handled smoothly. I think that there's a lot to this. I mean, I was just thinking about this today, we never got anything on that whole Hunter assisting Owens. Like, it's just been dropped. It's not even mentioned any longer. I'm sure at some point we'll get around to it. But that was another thing where Rollins gets screwed by this guy. He never gets his revenge. And it just seems that Rollins, you're right, he's just never had that real connection to the audience that sparked a babyface turn. And he's struggling with that, I think, in the moment. And he feels very much the background character of these three, because it's Jericho and Owens that I think people have their focus on, and that's the feud people want to see them progress to.
Yes, and the other thing with Rollins is, and this might give you some bad memories of those Review and Impact days, but when they start to try to get him to be funny, it comes across as like a poor man's Ken Anderson almost. Like, he's not as bad as Anderson, but he's in the neighborhood. He's circling the block. Like the stuff tonight with the Sparkle Crotch. It just, like, come on, man. Like, we're supposed to be taking you seriously. You've got a legitimate gripe, a legitimate complaint, but you're out here playing Mr. Comedy.
So that led into our first match of the night with Jericho and Rollins, the rematch from last week. And this crowd, I mean, we can blame some of the comedy here, but we can also blame this crowd for carrying forward this sparkle crotch chant that permeated into the match. And they had a pretty good match here. There was a double underhook backbreaker by Jericho. Rollins then kicked him in the gut and on 2 occasions went for the pedigree, and each of them was blocked with a back body drop. There was a fan in the front row, Nate, that had a sign advocating for Brutus Beefcake for the Hall of Fame next year, which if you think Bret Hart was upset about the Freebirds, I mean, Brutus Beefcake, I don't know where that would rank on Bret's list. On Bret's list. I don't know if he's making Bret's list. Then we saw Jericho actually, it was Rollins with a penalty kick to the chest, followed that with a sling blade getting a 2 count. Jericho came back with a lion salt for a 2 count. And then Owens came out to his music, and Rollins is climbing the turnbuckle. He hits a high cross to Jericho on the floor and then landed a springboard knee. The pedigree gets countered into the walls, and then Rollins is trying to reach the rope, and Owens is pulling the rope back. He gets caught by the referee and then sent away. Jericho blocks a pedigree, hits an enziguri. The code breaker is blocked, and finally Rollins hits the pedigree on the 3rd try and gets the win. Owens leaves frustrated, and Michael Cole brings up that Owens has cost Jericho yet again with his refusal to stay in the back after they had agreed to it.
This was a really strong match, John. I think maybe other than the closing segment, this might have been my favorite part of the show tonight, which says something when your 2 best segments are like 2.5 hours apart. But I thought it was a good job of storytelling. I liked that they didn't go for the cheap distraction finish, which is what I thought we were going to get when Owens came out. And, I think all 3 of these guys have good chemistry in the ring. I just wish there were a little bit better story from Rollins' side in terms of why we should be invested in them.
Yeah, I'm with you. This was probably the second best thing on the show. And, man, there was a lot of stuff that was just pure filler for the next 2.5 hours until that final segment. I mean, a lot of stuff with guys that have, I mean, you don't even expect to have matches at Hell in a Cell that we would be going through. So get ready, everybody. We will be going through all of it.
It was like right then where I started to feel like Kevin Owens, because I was like, you know what? On the surface, being a guest co-host and filling in for Brother Ting, it seems prestigious. It seems like a great honor. But when you look at this 3-hour show, it's torture.
It's always a trick, Nate. But once I get the agreement out of someone, they can then discover that on their own. So Michael Cole then plugs Goldberg's storied career in WCW and WWE. I will agree that both you could write stories about, one being a fairy tale and the other being a horror film. You know what? Realistically, the final 2 years of WCW, you could tack onto that as well. I don't know about the storied WWE career, Nate. I don't know if that is what necessarily everyone had fond memories of when it was announced he would be appearing on Raw. Like,
I was trying to think beforehand. Like, obviously, I knew about the Triple H match, and I knew some of the spots that Goldberg had when he was in the WWE, but I would say for most people, if they remember his WWE run at all, it's for that last match, which is not the best way to set up and frame your hero.
Yeah, when you think of that year, like what does come to mind for you, Nate? That year in the WWE?
I remember the Rock feud because I thought that had potential. I really liked the interplay between those two. And then I remember that last match at WrestleMania. Other than that, it's just I felt that he was one of the guys that they kind of dropped the ball on. And it was a shame because I think with their marketing machine and the way they can get guys over, and Goldberg, who at the time still had a lot of name value, they could have done so much more with each other.
Yeah, and he came in at a time when, my God, did they need someone. They had just lost Austin and Rock, because Rock was just doing that pay-per-view and then disappearing. I mean, they needed that guy so much to just catch fire like he did in WCW, and it was just fumbled throughout that year. I mean, there were a few moments in there. I think that SummerSlam Elimination Chamber, that might have been the high point in terms of handling him properly. I remember a very good match he had with Chris Jericho, but man, were those fleeting moments in that 1 year span. I could not imagine anyone being surprised that both sides were willing to move on after the year was up. But this clip that they showed, this was the first of a number of clips, and I was really glad they did this throughout the night. It was his Nitro debut from September 22nd of 97 against Hugh Morris. Who would have thought we'd see Bill DeMott on TV this week?
Oh man, like I love these, John, and we'll talk about some more of the clips as the night goes along. But as somebody who obviously was a fan of that time period with WCW, I thought it was a good idea to educate the audience. And this is why this company frustrates me sometimes, because obviously they wanted to get Goldberg across to the newer fans, and they put in the time and the effort to do so. But on other things that they could build up just as easily, they seem to do the bare minimum. And I'm thinking of things like the Cruiserweight Classic or the Cruiserweight division. It's just kind of barely getting by. Like, we'll just put it on there just to have it there. But with this guy, we're going to roll out the red carpet. It's like, shouldn't everything kind of be an event?
Well, that's what they tried to make this return out of for Bill Goldberg on Monday. Then we had a shot of who I feel was the best non-wrestler on tonight's show. And that was John Hickenlooper,
yes,
the governor of Colorado, who the announcers explained was here specifically to see Goldberg. And when he was introduced, he actually got some boos. The Democrat, John Hickenlooper. So this was definitely venturing into your territory, Nate. And John Hickenlooper would have an even bigger contribution later in the night, because he had one of my favorite cutaways of the year later on.
Yeah, this dude was great. Like, I know, the listeners out there might know Brian Mann and myself to Review America, but just on this one appearance, I might be tempted to cast my vote for John Hickenlooper.
Well, I don't know if John Hickenlooper was, I don't know if he was paid for this appearance or not, but this guy needs to be brought up to Toronto. This guy needs to follow all of Bill Goldberg's appearances from here on out, because this guy was the best accessory imaginable tonight. Then we got the first of two Lita sit-down interviews with Charlotte. And Lita lists off names like Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Mick Foley, and Triple H. And in 2 weeks, Charlotte and Sasha will add their names to that list. And with Charlotte, she brings up the Forbes article about Charlotte being, quote, the greatest female the industry has ever seen. And Charlotte says she could be the greatest male or female in the WWE. She actually, hedged the compliment and just narrowed it down to current WWE, from greatest performer or greatest female ever in the industry. She brought up the fact that she's won at 12 straight pay-per-views, and they brought up the injury to Sasha at SummerSlam, and also hitting the fact that this will be in Sasha's hometown of Boston. And Charlotte's saying that she will be the woman to beat at Hell in a Cell. Nate, what did you think of our first sit-down interview with Charlotte? Oh, boy.
I did not like either one of these, but with this one in particular, I think Charlotte still has a great character, and I think she's got a great grasp of her character. But my issue was with the interviewer. And it's no shade on Lita. She's a Hall of Famer and well-deserving of that honor, but she's not a Hall of Fame interviewer or a Hall of Fame reporter. That's not her strong suit. This should have been handed off to Michael Cole. I think he would have been the guy to get this across. And I understand they probably did it because, let's get a female interviewer to really play up the women's empowerment angle on this. But it didn't work, at least in my opinion. I thought Cole would have been much better served for this. But
you know what? To that fact of a female, you could have used Charlie Caruso in this role. Give her something here. Yeah. They've just moved her to Raw. She seems to have a very good presentation skill. She's very good. She could have been used here as well. I was with you. Lita felt very awkward. These did not feel like natural conversations. That said, I did think Charlotte hit upon a lot of points in this to get across the hometown angle, the fact that Sasha clearly is going into this still battling a back injury, and the key one that Charlotte's won at 12 straight pay-per-views, and that sets up Hell in a Cell. So I thought you did accomplish a lot with the actual content. Yeah,
the content was good. The delivery, not so much, at least from Lita's point of view. And we can talk about the second part of this wonderful, I was going to say double play, but I don't want to bring up baseball terminology to you right now, John.
Russell Martin / Michael Elgin is on my screen right now. And God, Game 4 tomorrow at 3:00 Eastern time. We don't even get 24 hours to recover. They're just throwing us right back out there.
Going to be a lot of day drinking in the 6 tomorrow.
My goodness, it's going to be some long faces Wednesday morning is my prediction. Goldust comes out and announces we are the Golden Truth, and we are all very aware. And this leads to R-Truth coming out with the lyrics on the screen, and Mark Henry, fresh off his Review-A appearance from last week. By appearance, I mean we reviewed his debut match with Jerry Lawler, who did not have the same kind of run 20 years ago as Bill Goldberg did. But nonetheless, we had a six-man here with Goldust, R-Truth, and Mark Henry against the Shining Stars and Titus O'Neil.
But before we get into the match, John, can I bring up a gripe that I've always had with Truth's theme song that I've never put out on a podcast format before?
Is it because the "What's Up" never has a question mark at the end of it?
That's terrible. But there's one line in particular, and I'm not an ageist because I'm getting old my damn self. But he still has the line in the song, "I'm the baddest young brother in the game." I'm like, my man, you're like 45.
But the man does not age.
It's like Heartbreak. Shawn Michaels is still a Heartbreak Kid at 50.
Yeah, you know what? Some people can, and God knows the Heartbreak Kid. He has aged. But R-Truth, I mean, you've got to say, for a guy that, if you had to guess his age, it'd be, you know a guy who looks very old but is not. You know the former Drake Younger, who's now one of the referees?
Yes.
Okay, you look at him, you're probably guessing 40s. And that guy is younger than me.
Are you serious?
He's 32. He was born in September of 84.
Wow.
And you look at him, you're guessing no less than 40.
He's got
that's what death matches will do in Combat Zone.
I'm gonna say he's got some city miles on him.
So this six-man, Nate, was set up on the pre-show, and the Shining Stars have moved on from timeshares in Puerto Rico to selling bootleg watches. And the agreement was, if the Shining Stars and Titus win, then Goldust, Truth, and Mark Henry have to buy these watches, and R-Truth agreed to this. What the hell?
This was... I know intellectually, John, I know this was stupid, but I chuckled. Just at the fact that, I don't know if it was Primo or Epico, but one of them had like the 6 or 7 Folexes on his wrist, and
yes,
like that aspect of it was pretty entertaining. But I'm like, why is this match even existing on my television screen? Like, you've got 6 guys that pretty much have nothing going on right now, and then we're gonna put them all in the same match?
I love that this six-man, someone said, we can't just throw this match out cold. We need to give them a reason.
Yes.
And this was the reason. So there was something on the line here. Their money. They got the advantage on Goldust. This crowd was either baked or dead. There was a tag made to R-Truth, who fired up on Titus and then hit a scissors kick. Primo made the save, and then Epico sent Goldust to the floor. Truth hit the lie detector to Epico, and then Henry made the blind tag, and the only thing the crowd got into was when he lifted up Titus for the world's strongest slam and pinned him in 3 minutes and 10 seconds. So Mark Henry got a reaction here, but that was about all I can say, and Goldust, R-Truth, and Mark Henry get to save their money. Yeah,
this was a nothing match. I don't know why in the hell it was on my TV screen, but I do have a question for you, Brother John, since you are, the investigative reporter of the two of us.
I don't time matches with a fake Rolex, if that's what you're going to ask.
No, I wasn't going to ask about your timekeeping strategies, but I was going to ask, has Titus O'Neil released another press conference tonight?
You know what? Those usually come out on Tuesday, so I imagine he will. I mean, he did them the last 2 weeks, so I imagine that's going to be the ongoing theme. Do you see any light at the end of the Titus for Mr. O'Neil? Is there any?
I don't get what he's doing. Like, I like the last one he did was, I forget who he lost to, but he was who he thought he was. He was doing a riff on Dennis Green, and I think the one before that he was doing some other riff on a famous post games interview, but it's an interesting segment in a vacuum, or it's an interesting bit in a vacuum, but there's nothing to connect it to the meat of the show. Like, this whole Titus O'Neil brand thing is a joke. I don't know what they're doing with this guy. I don't have zero idea. Like, see, I can't even talk when I'm starting to sound like Titus on the promo. But ever since he got back from being in Vince McMahon's doghouse, I don't think they've known what to do with this guy. First he's the family guy, that is there for his children, and he gets punked in front of his children every week by Rusev. And then he's the guy that's jealous of Darren Young, and that goes nowhere. And Darren Young, I don't think Darren Young was on this show, at least not that I remember.
Oh, he was on the show, actually. We will get to it. He had a brief cameo, but if you blinked, you missed it.
So that Darren Young thing went nowhere. Now he's doing the Titus brand thing, and I don't get it, man. He's a guy that I think there's a lot of people on this show that need to be shuffled, and maybe some people need to go down to NXT. And I'm not saying that because I think Titus is not worthy of being on the main roster, but I think NXT would benefit more from having, some veterans that aren't gaining traction on the main roster, and maybe they can do something down there to help out the kids.
What if they do this? Okay, Nate, this is what they've got to build up to, okay? He keeps teaming with the Shining Stars for a few more weeks, and then the next time they're in Philadelphia, they realize, okay, we're losing a lot here. So Titus, on the pre-show, I want you to show up, and we're gonna work out in the ring. And then the Shining Stars are there in Philadelphia. Titus blows them off, and then they get upset because he skipped practice. And that can be Titus's press conference after, where suddenly everyone shows up and they're asking him about, why'd you miss practice? And Titus is just dumbfounded that we're talking about practice.
He is good in those little post game things, like the last one where the mic kept breaking. Get a better microphone. That was funny, but his in ring stuff is not working. Maybe he should just be a big swollen manager dude, like just a manager that's bigger than the actual wrestler he's managing.
In the last 4 minutes, this is the most time any of us at the Law have spent on Titus O'Neil this year. So this is already progress for the character. The fact that we are debating Titus O'Neil and what is next for him. Chris Jericho was backstage, and he walked up to Kevin Owens, who apologized for coming down to ringside, and Jericho is very frustrated. And Owens says that they're playing into Mick Foley and Seth Rollins' game. And Jericho almost goes to call him a stupid idiot, and Owens gets very upset at this. They start arguing, and Jericho gets defensive, saying that he is not Owens' lackey, and Owens did not help him tonight. And then out of nowhere, Stephanie appears and said that Rollins is getting into both of their heads, and she needs her two generals, Owens and Jericho, because of the Survivor Series elimination match, because she's accepted Shane and Daniel Bryan's challenge. And that ended the segment, and concluded that we are going to get those 3 elimination matches at the Survivor Series, which everyone anticipated when it was rolled out last week. Do you like the direction they're going, Nate, with the 3 elimination matches that they introduced and all of the bodies they're going to have? Or were you always a fan of the elimination matches?
I am a fan of the old school Survivor Series matches, but I do think there's a limit to them, much like a Hell in a Cell. Like, I think this Hell in a Cell that we're going to see coming up, there's probably one too many cell matches. Because I think, you get to the law of diminishing returns if there's too much on one card. And I think it's the same thing with these elimination matches. Like, if there were 2, I think that's great. 3, it just kind of feels, just like we got bodies for the sake of bodies. Like, I think if you did a women's elimination and the guys' elimination, like, we don't need all these damn tag teams filling up the card. I know everybody wants to get paid, but there's something to be said over quantity.
Yeah, and I mean, those 3 elimination matches alone, I mean, that takes care of like 40 people when you consider there's going to be 10 tag teams involved in that one match. And this is a 4-hour show. That's crazy. So that means every single person is probably going to be booked on this show, and some of these matches are going to be super long by necessity. So that's kind of what you're looking at. I mean, this is not a roster that once you get into the depth issues, I mean, Darren Young and Titus are probably going to have spots at Survivor Series, would be my assumption, Nate. Then we go to, then we had Sheamus and Cesaro coming out. And Nate, we have a new choreographed entrance for Sheamus and Cesaro. The two can't even get along in the car ride with the directions, but they were able to sit down and block out an entrance for one another.
Yes.
As they came out, and we have Sheamus doing his usual pose in the lights, and Cesaro has his back to him, kind of like a Charlie's Angels deal. But instead of a gun, he's holding something just as lethal. It's his Facebook Live feed. And his gimmick appears to be that he just shoots everything on Facebook Live now. And these two are just going to take turns as the Facebook Live guys.
You know what this interest kind of reminded me of, John? It's a bit from Family Guy, and Family Guy's a show that I'm not really much of a fan of anymore, but they had this one great bit where I think Stewie or Brian was pitching a TV show, and they did the deal where, you know, Fox or NBC or whatever will put up the graphic in the lower third of whatever show's coming up next. And they had like a black dude and a white dude like standing back to back and laughing. Like, coming up next, it's the opposites. These guys are total opposites, but they get along so well. And then they, you know, just kept rotating the guys. And that's what I felt about Sheamus and Cesaro here. It's like they're some type of weird lethal weapon buddy cop team that you know, Sheamus doesn't like Cesaro because he doesn't play by the rules, and Cesaro thinks Sheamus is too stuffy, but somehow they're gonna, you know, find a way to work together and get along.
Well, maybe that's what it's building up to. It's R-Truth is going to walk in because apparently he's too old in your eyes, Nate, to announce. He'll be the Murtaugh of the group. Announce he's just too old for this shit. So the New Day comes out, and Big E says how Sheamus must be a mile high if he thinks he's going to beat him. They also had a sign that this was day 420 of their title reign, and being that they were in Colorado, I mean, it just lent itself so naturally to it. Then Xavier, with a plea to one Nate Milton, said how the two presidential candidates would be a closer-knit tag team than Sheamus and Cesaro. And this crowd booed this. I don't think they wanted to hear any politics tonight. That was what I got out of this. And maybe that was as well why they booed the Colorado governor. If there are any listeners in Colorado, they can let me know what the political temperature is like on your governor. But they certainly booed when the Trump and Clinton references were danced upon here by Woods.
Yeah, I think, you know, I may be wrong, but I think Colorado is Gary Johnson country. So maybe if he had thrown in a Gary Johnson reference, he would have got a pop off of it.
What, like he would forget Cesaro and Sheamus' names?
Oh, poor Gary.
That's going to live in infamy, that clip.
Yeah.
That will squash any Howard Dean shade that is ever cast ever again, when he's always got, hey man, I didn't Gary Johnson anything. I was just excited. And
he had two of them. That's what makes it so bad. Like, he had the Aleppo one, of course, and then on the Chris Matthews deal, he's like, you know, can you name a foreign leader? Ooh, I'm having an Aleppo moment here, Chris. He's like, no time for jokes, Mr. Governor. Name a foreign leader you respect.
As dumb as Gary Johnson came across, it's Chris Matthews that truly makes that segment, because he's like giving him the ultimate life raft. Like, just any leader. And he's got nothing.
I said it, the former president of Mexico.
Vicente Fox?
Poor guy.
The New Day is out. Sorry, I'm going back in time here.
So it sounds like you're a mile high there, John.
Yeah. Kofi joked about beating Cesaro last week, even though he slipped on the springboard, and how they can't say Sheamus without the word shame, and it led to a chant. And then Xavier said for the 420 days that they have legally been your tag team champions. And then Kofi notes that he's hungry and has the munchies. This is about as far, I think, as they could go to pot references on Raw,
yeah,
Nate.
Unless Rob Van Dam came back.
Yeah, well, then that would be his territory.
I got a question, though, John, real quick before we get into this match. Because it's something that I've been pondering the last few months. The New Day, at least in my opinion, are not as hot as they once were. You know, they still get a good reaction. But A, I don't think their material's as good. And B, I don't know if they feel as fresh. Do you think that's mainly on them, or the fact that they have been stuck in some lackluster feuds that don't lend themselves to creativity?
I think it's a bit of both. I think that I feel it was a bit of a mistake when they got so heavily reliant on them to go out. And you remember where they were getting thrown out there for lengthy periods of time. Like, it wouldn't be foreign for them to go out there and have to kill 10 minutes of talking, and sometimes multiple times on shows. And I think that at a certain point, they kind of did hit a bit of a wall together. And yeah, you're right. They haven't had much to work off of. The feud with Anderson and Gallows was awful. Like, they have not had that team to really feud with. They haven't allowed any of the teams to really get much heat on them. And when they did, it was around Big E's balls.
Yeah, honestly, I think the most reaction they had from an encounter or interaction with a team was when they did the thing with Enzo and Cass a few months ago. Like, that was maybe the last time the audience was actually interested in somebody that could potentially be a feud.
Yeah, I mean, it was great a couple of weeks ago when they did that segment with Owens and Jericho, and I actually liked the direction of Jericho and Owens going after the tag titles, but they're certainly not going that way. But, I mean, when they have the right people, like in that case, in that segment, I mean, all five guys worked off each other so well, and you don't really have any foils here. It's just the New Day comes out, and it's just whatever references and jokes we can come up with, and it's not like they're even playing off of their opponents. Sheamus and Cesaro, like Anderson and Gallows and the Vaudevillains when they were doing that feud, they just kind of sit there and they just listen to the jokes, and it's I think it kind of loses something. But I mean, they're still popular to a lot of people. They sell a lot of merchandise, so I don't think they're this floundering act. But I think that as well, it's a tag division that's really, it's just them. They're in this tag division by themselves, essentially.
Yeah, when you think about it, like I think most of us assumed that SmackDown would have the weaker tag division, but that's not the case at all. You know, there's actually intriguing teams on SmackDown, whereas over here you've got New Day, you've got Enzo and Cass, then you got a bunch of also rans, and then that includes the Club, two guys who I thought would actually be something, on this roster.
Well, and this will go to my the same point here throughout this match. Okay, so we have Big E and Sheamus. Keep in mind that last week we had Kofi Kingston overcome his own mistake to still pin Cesaro as they're getting this tag title shot. So they go through a break early. Cesaro is still on Facebook Live. Sheamus comes off the top, gets hit with 3 belly-to-belly suplexes by Big E. Then Sheamus hit the Irish Curse. Big E caught him, hit a power bomb for a near fall. Then we got the white noise from Sheamus. Cesaro then climbs into the crowd with the phone, and Sheamus gets knocked off the apron by Big E. Sheamus then takes the phone and tells Cesaro to film him for the best brogue kick ever. And he turns around and he eats a splash from Big E, who then pins Sheamus. The only thing that was kind of funny about this was the replay of the finish was actually done from the perspective of Cesaro's phone on Facebook Live and what you would have seen with this finish. And the first comment that they had on the screen was someone telling Cesaro that he should be the one running for president. But in the case of last week and this week, we have the New Day beat the challengers, and now next week we're going to get a non-title match involving the two teams. But it just seems like they have this really hesitancy to build any kind of heat for the challengers. There's nothing for this team to essentially overcome.
No, and I don't like that, the whole construct of Sheamus and Cesaro. Like, it feels like in this situation, yeah, you can do the tension, but that only lasts for so long. I think if you really wanted to heat these guys up, you would probably have to flip either Sheamus or Cesaro. And I think I might be inclined, even though I like him as a babyface, to flip Cesaro.
Yeah, but then you're getting right back to that feud, which to me it was so played out midway through the best of 7 series. That
No, I don't mean the feuding against each other. I mean both of those guys being heels.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Because right now you've got like a babyface and somebody that the fans don't give a damn about with Sheamus against still pretty popular babyface tag team in the New Day. But if you make Cesaro and Sheamus the ass kickers that Anderson and Gallows were supposed to be, that might get some traction.
It's also, I mean, as they push this demolition record, we're still 2 months away from that. So I don't know how much people really even buy into. I mean, they're not giving you any reason on TV to buy into the challengers, but I don't think any people are to begin with, because I think everyone thinks you're so close to this record in December. Why would you flip the titles 2 months before you can tease that and either beat the streak or come right up to it and allow a team to then beat you for the titles in December?
Maybe that's the end game, that this is all leading up to New Day versus Demolition.
That could be maybe that will be the feud come TLC in December or whatever their pay-per-view is. The next Goldberg clip was arguably the most popular Goldberg clip and one of the best Nitro moments ever, and that was July the 6th of 98, where he defeated Hulk Hogan at the Georgia Dome in front of 41,412 people. This was just an incredible night. Probably something you could have done on pay-per-view and should have done on pay-per-view, but it did happen on Nitro, and it was one of the great Nitro moments ever, Nate.
Yeah, still one of the best, wrestling moments on free TV, or at least, cable TV, that I've ever seen, and there is an argument to be made, a strong argument to be made, that this should have been something you made people pay for. But even still, and this is going back and rebooking WCW, I don't think that this in and of itself was that bad of a mistake. I just think the follow-up compounded whatever issues there were with not, making some money off of this thing. But just that moment, though, it was surreal. And like, people forget how big a deal Goldberg was. Like, there was, at one point, he was almost up to Austin's level. I don't know if he ever surpassed Stone Cold in terms of overall popularity, but he was pretty damn close.
On this night in July of 98, I mean, you could certainly make that argument. I mean, if you have never seen this clip of that match with Hogan and Goldberg and the heat they had and how insane you had 41,000 people going for Goldberg winning that title, it's unbelievable. It's seriously one of the best moments ever on a wrestling program was that night and that title win, and just the crowd heat. It was unbelievable for the time, and even going back now, I mean, it's rare you ever are going to hear a crowd like that just losing their minds for Goldberg that night. Backstage, Curtis Axel's with Bo Dallas. God, one extreme to the other. And Dallas says he is the only one who needs to believe in Bo. Axel says he believes as well in Bo. And that's the storyline. Bo Dallas is out, and he's got Axel in his corner, and his opponent is Neville. And Dallas is on offense at the start. This was the match where I was looking down at my phone to see if Nate was going to be emailing me to inform me that something's come up tonight. And he was just going to bail on me. But a true champ. He made it to the end. So Dallas is continuing with his aggressive streak. He's dropping knees. Neville comes back with some kicks, an enziguri. He goes to the top, but then Dallas rolls to the floor, and Neville hit an Asai moonsault. Dallas then ran into a boot in the corner, and Neville goes to scale the top, but on the apron he gets tripped up by Dallas, who then hits his roll of the dice for the win. At 2:56, Bo Dallas gets a victory, and afterwards, as he's celebrating, he attacks Curtis Axel, the one man who believed in him, and threw him into the barricade repeatedly, ran a knee into him, and the announcers stated that only Bo can believe in Bo. So we have our kickoff program for the rest of the Raw pay-per-views this year. Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel.
There were two things wrong with this match, John. The first was Neville. And I know that just because he lost, it doesn't mean he was technically quote unquote buried, but he seems to be in this weird space where he's quote unquote too good to be lumped in with the other cruiserweights, but he's not good enough to be anything of substance with the other guys on the roster. It's like, you got a guy that he's not going to headline pay-per-views, but they could be getting so much more value out of this guy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, him and Sami Zayn, to me, are the two that are just completely lost on Raw. And I don't think it takes a whole lot of creativity to come up with stuff with them. And it's just, it's interesting. We will get to Sami Zayn later on because he was on this show.
So, but then my other point with this match, and it's kind of fitting that it's happening here in Denver with all this talk of, 420 and being high, because the moment we got that Bo Dallas turn, because I don't know what he was before going into this match, but the moment we got that Bo Dallas turn, I flashed back to that scene from Half Baked where Bob Saget's in the drug program and Dave Chappelle's, saying I need help because I smoke marijuana. And then you got the guy standing up. He's like, you in here for some weed? Boo this man. That as soon as I saw Bo Dallas turn on Curtis Axel, I was like, no, boo this man. This is not something I want to be a part of. And I'm angry at you, WWE, for dragging me into this feud.
Is there anything salvageable with Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel. Do you see anything? Is there a diamond in the rough here? I mean, people forget. I mean, a lot of people were really high on Joe Hennig years ago, and it's just been so many years of this guy in this preliminary role that I think a lot of people have just written him off. Do you see any way to turn any of these guys around and get them back on track?
And it's a shame because I really do think that there was some value with Curtis Axel once upon a time, and he's still, he's still a solid worker, but I don't think people are going to believe in him, or believe in him. With Dallas, I don't know. It's weird because I think I was gonna say his character's over, but it's not. It's really that catchphrase. Like people like saying Bo Leave and making the puns out of his name, but is there anything from this new Bo Dallas character that is going to separate him from, say, a Brian Kendrick? Because I feel like just from what we saw tonight, it's going to be kind of, if not the same character, a very similar character. And just by past experience, I would guess that Brian Kendrick could probably play this character better.
Yeah, it's just interesting when you look at this with Bo Dallas and Neville, and which guy is apparently getting the push forward and which guy is setting up the guy to get the push forward.
And why aren't these guys on SmackDown? Because Curtis Axel can get lost on Raw. But I think, if you're telling me my choices are Jack Swagger, Baron Corbin, or Curtis Axel, who's to say Curtis Axel wouldn't have a better run if he were on SmackDown right now?
Really, the only justification you could have is that if they were planning a Neville turn, which of all the guys on this Raw roster, why would you ever turn this guy? Yeah. Like Neville to me to me would be such a strange choice to make. But we will see. Neville he's definitely struggling. Dana Brooke and Bayley was next.
I mean, yeah, I couldn't see that from Neville because he's always been such a, wait for it, John, straight arrow.
Oh, boy.
That was for you. That was for you.
He is growing that beard, though. So let us not discount anything. Dana Brooke and Bayley. Bayley came out, and she got a better reaction on this show up until this point than I would say anyone. This crowd was all chanting for her as she came down the ramp, and then the match began. She snapped Dana on the middle rope and then hit a face buster. And Byron says that Bayley embraces her childhood. And Corey says he's a grown-up. He doesn't watch cartoons, and then says to Byron that Bayley must be the Ken Bone of the WWE.
Wow.
Which I don't see that parallel, especially after the past couple of days.
Ken Bone.
It's as though Corey hasn't been following the news since like last Wednesday, maybe. No. When Ken Bone was the darling of everybody, and now he's just rather frightening to people.
So I would give you my thoughts on Ken Bone, but I don't think I could say it any better than Brian Mann did on Review America, so I'm going to let that be the last word on Ken Bone.
You know why I think he got so upset was before you guys recorded, I just sent Brian a random text message because I saw this guy on like every damn show. And I said, Brian, I only said it half jokingly, but enough that it would have been funny. I was like, you two should totally get Ken Bone on your show because this guy will totally come on. Like, I had no doubt this guy would come on. And I got no response from Brian. And his response on Review America was all I needed to hear from him on his thoughts on Ken Bone. But hey, no one has solved his heating problems, though. Dana is stomping on Bayley in the corner and then did this handstand, choking Bayley with her boot as the crowd is cheering on Bayley. We had a drop toe hold. There was a fan there were so many political references throughout this show now that I'm like running through them. There was a guy in the crowd with a Donald Trump cutout face on and was doing the hand waving that Bayley always does. If you can find this during the Bayley-Dana Brooke match, it was the highlight of this match, was this Donald Trump cutout doing the Bayley hand wave. It was awesome. Dana then runs Bayley into the post on the apron, pulls her into the ring, and covers her, and you can see Dana going to put her foot on the rope, but she's too far out, so she just pins her normally, and the announcers were so surprised, they kind of had no real reaction to this other than, well, Dana won fair and square. And that was it.
Oh.
I mean, she did use the post, but I really feel she was supposed to get like her feet on the ropes or something here to make it more clear that she was cheating to beat Bayley. But instead, this just came off as essentially a clean victory for Dana.
I don't know, John. And maybe it's just, the cynical wrestling fan in me, but and it's something that they can change. They have the power to change, but I think up to this point, Bayley has just kind of become another person on the roster. Like whatever specialness he had from NXT or her first debut as Sasha's mystery partner, like that has all been washed away. Like she just feels like another part of the regular Raw rotation. And even though she still gets great reactions, there's nothing between the bells that leads me to believe this is somebody I should be interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the crowd is still into her. I think she has that going for her for sure. But a Dana feud, it's unfortunate because the women's division on Raw is basically 3 people, and she's the odd woman out at the moment. And I mean, a feud with Dana is it's somewhat limiting.
What's going on with Nia Jax? Is she hurt or something?
She hasn't been on for quite a few weeks, but not to my understanding. Yeah, I don't know what they've done with it with Nia. Right?
Nia's not a great in-ring competitor by any stretch, but I think I would be more interested in a Bayley-Nia feud than this Bayley-Dana stuff.
I thought that Bayley and Nia had a pretty decent match by Nia Jax standards at that TakeOver show last year, and just doing the David versus Goliath story or whatever the female version of that would be called. So yeah, perhaps with Nia they just feel until they're ready to go forward with her, they've kind of cooled her off at the moment and just taken her off TV. But we had the interview with Paul Heyman, who was in Denver on Monday, identified as joining us from WWE Studios. And this is when the Goldberg chants began. And he said last week the challenge from Brock was rhetorical. He says he expects Goldberg to come and accept the challenge. He's not going to fly here to say no. And says that Lesnar doesn't even think about him. He's not worth the sweat off his tuchus. And every time that he said his name, he just said Bill with this disdain in his voice, and said he's going to piss off Lesnar if he accepts this challenge. And I mean, Heyman just so easily just orchestrated this crowd by saying, you all chant your stupid name, and it just led to them all chanting Goldberg even louder. He took his earpiece out to reveal that he can hear everybody and said that Goldberg will be humbled and humiliated. A pretty good promo here from Paul Heyman, and I think this was more just setting the table to get everyone in the mode of chanting for Goldberg come the end of the show.
Yeah, well, like whatever they're paying Paul Heyman, he deserves every penny of it because he finds a way to make even something that, by all rights, like logically, we should not be excited for a 50-year-old dude to be fighting, how old is Brock, 45?
Brock is 38.
Damn, he's another one with city miles on him. But yeah, damn, I didn't know Brock was that young. Wow.
Yeah, he's not 40 yet. 38, 39, I believe. Wow. Yeah.
That's a hard 38. But
39.
It's a hard 39. But like, by all rights, we should not be excited about this. But after hearing what Heyman had to say and how he hyped it up and how he, the little things like taking out the earpiece so he couldn't hear the Goldberg chants from the Denver crowd, like it was great. And I wish they'd use him more, to be quite honest with you, because a little Paul Heyman goes a long way on these shows, that are so packed with filler. Maybe 10 minutes every other week or, a couple, few times a month from Paul like that would spice up these shows.
Up next was Braun Strowman, and this week he had 3 opponents as Saxton interviewed the Mile High Trio, who were not given any names, and one of them questioned if Braun has adjusted to the altitude in Colorado.
That was great.
That was fantastic. One of them mentioning they're all from Denver, so they got the hometown pop. Braun came in. He shoved 2 of them to the floor, splashed the other in the corner, and then took the guy in the corner and hit a Beal, sending him over the top to the floor. Cole calls one of them Colin Kaepernick, and Graves says he thought he was No Way Jose's cousin. Then one of them is on the floor and wants to leave. Braun had other plans and chased him on the floor, knocking him down. Then he came back in. He hit the dude in red tights with a power slam and choke slammed the other on top of him and pinned him in 2:16. I will go so far as to say, of all, with the exception of course, James Ellsworth, which was week 1, this might have been the best Braun Strowman squash we've seen.
I really like this.
Like, Braun Strowman is really starting to, I feel, catch on, and he's doing more, and he just murdered these three. And yeah, I thought this was really good. I thought this was among Braun's best performances we've seen. Yeah,
this is fun. Like, you had the I love that they find these jobbers with so much personality. Like you had on this one, you had the guy that they said was Colin Kaepernick. I personally thought he looked like Zach De La Rocha from Rage Against the Machine. It's like Zach De La Rocha and two guys that could be the American Wolves stunt doubles. But it was fun, man. Like, when he's chasing the guy, I love these squash matches, and I'm not a Braun Strowman fan by any stretch. So, like, it was funny because during the match, I'm like, oh, these are great. They should never have him do anything else for the rest of his career than these squash matches. This is awesome. Maybe throw him in a battle royal every now and then, but he should be the squash match king. And then we get the post-match stuff, and I'm like, I didn't hate the post-match, but I think that my fear with Braun Strowman is he's going to be elevated past his talent level.
Yeah, that's the thing. This, for all intents and purposes, could have been the last Braun Strowman squash, because afterwards he gets on the microphone and he threatens to come after Mick Foley because he wants better competition, and he gets interrupted by Sami Zayn. And the crowd is chanting for him. He gets into the ring and Strowman just shoves Zayn and he flies to the floor and Braun leaves. And then backstage, Charlie Caruso interviews Zayn. He says he picked a fight with Braun because no one else will. So it looks like we have Braun Strowman's first actual program now in this this remake of his character. And it's going to be with Sami Zayn, so you could certainly be with a lot worse guys.
Yeah.
But I'm with you, Nate. I think that, we just have gotten to this stretch after a number of months where we can do a 2-minute and 15-second match with Braun killing guys, and now you're going to ask him to do, like, you can't just beat Sami Zayn in 3 minutes. I mean, you've got to do an 8-9 minute match, and Braun should probably win that match because he's the one they're pushing here, and Sami, they're not.
And it's two things. Like, one, I still think there's mileage with these squash matches.
Pardon the pun.
Particularly if you can find the these squash guys with these personalities that just lend themselves to being entertaining. But the other thing is, when you talk about Sami Zayn, I don't want to see him lose to Braun Strowman.
I don't think anyone does. I mean, you're going to really, if you do want to.
What's he done since he's been drafted to Raw? Like, a whole lot of nothing.
He had that great Battleground match with Owens, and that's been it.
And that match probably shouldn't even happen, because wasn't it the match before that was supposed to be the last match between the two?
Oh, I'm lost on my.
They had the last match. I think it was right before the draft. They had one last match to settle the score, and then a month or so after, they both get drafted to Raw.
Right.
Let's go back in the ring again.
So that's been, Sami Zayn's plight, and I mean, he's someone that could definitely be utilized much more significantly over on SmackDown, where they don't have that depth.
I would love if once AJ finishes with Dean and hopefully keeps the belt, I would love to see like an AJ Sami Zayn feud. I think that would be amazing and really set SmackDown apart in terms of, your in-ring quality.
All right. I said before that the Jericho Rollins match was the second best thing on the show. I lied, because this next segment was. Lana introduced Rusev and referred to him as a true family man, which I immediately wrote down because I was like, that's kind of a weird thing to have him introduced as. And sure enough, we got a segment to back up this claim. He comes out, and Rusev, who's just got this character down perfectly at this point in his career, he just yells in Bulgarian. Lana calls their family values here in Denver pathetic. And Rusev says that Roman Reigns has his family that he's always talking about, his 700 Samoans sitting around a campfire eating turkey legs with mayonnaise and cracking coconuts. He says, in contrast, that Rusev's family is civilized and he says, "Meet the Rusevs." As I just sat back on my couch, Nate, and I just had a smile on my face at the words, "Meet the Rusevs." And boy, did we meet them. First was Mother Slavka, better known as Mother Rusev, who Rusev says is stronger than any American woman, a 2-time rowing champion. And we saw a photo of Mother Slavka along with her rowing team. The crowd begins to boo this, and Rusev just yells, "Don't you dare boo my mother." And he said this with such passion, Nate. And I'm saying to myself, like, this guy is responding like they're actually booing his mother. And then as we go through these photos, these are actual family photos that we were seeing of Rusev's family, Nate.
Yes.
This was unbelievable. So then we move on to, and then Rusev, after they're booing the mother, says, "I didn't know they legalized stupidity in this state." Then we saw Papa Rusev, where Rusev says this is where he gets his good looks from. He spent 3 years in the military and became a wrestling champion there. And then they show an updated photo of him with the greatest mustache of all time.
Yes.
Then we moved on to Brother Rusev. That was it. That was his name, Brother Rusev, who is the best chef in all of Bulgaria, as they show him in a restaurant, in like a kitchen, with like a pizza dough in the air that he's about to catch. And then finally was his grandmother, Babushka, and Maguerta, the dog. And he's going to show off a soccer team photo with his cousin when Roman Reigns finally interrupts. This was one of the best Rusev segments I've ever watched. I thought this was awesome, Nate. Maybe I'm out on a limb here. I thought this was fantastic.
You know, normally these segments...
Me and Nate are definitely on different pages here.
No, I was going to say, normally these segments don't do a whole lot for me, you know, when they go to the PowerPoint presentation. But when you have the combination of these photos, which, like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, is that his real mother? You know, is that his real father? And then you see the big family portrait at the end. I'm like, wow. And the conviction and the passion, you know, behind Rusev, you know, Mama Rusev, the backbone of our family, and Brother Rusev. And I didn't even see the pizza in the air. I just thought he was like posing, with, you know, in his restaurant. It's like, it almost babyface Rusev to me.
That's what they're really getting close to, because this guy is just so entertaining. And it would have been so WWE to do exactly what you said, the Photoshop segment of death, where you just get these freakish looking people as his family, and they're so clearly fake photos that the humor's lost. And instead it was real photos, and that just added this charm to it, that Rusev was actually showing off his family here that he's proud of. I just thought Rusev was the star of this segment, and he's been great of late.
Yeah, I really like this. Like, it was so much better than it could have been, and maybe so much better than they had any right to be. Just between, you know, Lana's introduction and then Rusev's performance, and also, you know, you'll talk about it here in a second, not a bad performance by the third member, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, Roman Reigns interrupted this. He comes out and says Rusev looks like the family dog, and then he plugs Hell in a Cell and says that at the end of it, Rusev is going to be calling 911. They kept this promo pretty short, and then it got physical when Lana stood in between them. She came up, she slapped Reigns, and then Rusev moved her aside and head kicked him, and then just beat down Reigns. He used the steel steps on Reigns, which they're incorporating the weapons that can be used in Hell in a Cell, and then it ended with the accolade on top of the steps inside of the ring, which, as we learned when Paige did the PTO on the announce desk, gravity always hurts more. And just left Roman for dead. And my complaints earlier about Cesaro and Sheamus not getting any heat on the champions, and we'd see it later with Carl Anderson with Big Cass, this was an example of allowing the heel to get heat on the babyface. I really thought this was a good segment between these two.
Yeah, I really like this. I thought Lana and Rusev were great, and Roman was surprisingly good. You know, they kept it short and sweet, and outside of the dog joke and, you know, talking about Rusev's father's sweet mustache, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of comedy. And I think that's the best way to kind of frame Roman. Like, yeah, he's got this sort of smugness might be the word. I was going to say it's not really cockiness. It's sort of a smugness that gets on the fans' nerves, but they kind of kept that in check. And I thought Roman delivered a good promo. They had some physicality. I really liked the Lana slap that set up Rusev's kick, because that's something that we've seen too often, particularly in the WWE. Like when the woman slaps the guy, it just kind of turns into a hokey segment. But to use that and show that the heels had a plan going into it, where she slapped him and then Rusev just kind of came around her with the kick, I really enjoyed it. It builds up heat for this match, even though I think Roman's still going to win. It at least gets me intrigued. And I would say maybe out of the 3 cell matches, this is probably the one that warrants the cell the most, just in terms of, the heat going into it.
Yeah, and that one, it's, to your point, I feel that Rusev, he's going to be, you're going to be having to battle the crowd, because I think especially in Boston, you're going to have that natural inclination for the crowd to boo Reigns, and Rusev, he's become so entertaining that's going to be their challenge in that match, is to keep the roles straight with both of them. So that will be a challenge, I feel. Then we had Goldberg's...
Do you think, real quick, do you think we get the Rusev family at ringside?
Oh, boy, you got to save that for something big. Have them at ringside. Yeah. Afterwards, we had Goldberg's WWE debut from the night after WrestleMania 19 in March of 2003. That was the segment where The Rock was going to announce his retirement, when Goldberg showed up, speared The Rock, and set up that program, which decent enough angle to introduce him as, and the match certainly was not all that great at Backlash that year. And that was kind of, now we were into the WWE years. So we got 2 whole clips, Nate, of his WCW time.
Yeah, I had the same, even though I praised this earlier, and I still think the clips were a good idea. I don't think they went far enough, but at least, they did more to build up Goldberg than they did to build up Sting, which we got 0 clips.
Well, yeah, the clips were a good idea. I'm with you. I think more, hey, at least they didn't show the taser. There was part of me that thought, it was like, oh God, they wouldn't show that, would they? And to their credit, they did not show the Starrcade loss. That would have been 10 forms of stupidity.
But about this clip in particular, real quick, like I still remember, and it's a credit to Goldberg, I guess, but mostly to The Rock, that I still remember that segment, because like we talked about, most of his WWE run was forgettable, but I would say most fans would still remember that segment, with the red lining, the red carpeting in the ring, and Rock's getting speared, and that was at the height of that Hollywood Rock character that I think, a lot of people,
which never came back when he did the match at Backlash, and then when he returned the next year, it was right back as a babyface.
I always thought that character was kind of underrated.
He was really good in the role. I just don't know how much people wanted to boo The Rock, because he was so entertaining as that heel as well.
It was like and this is a bad comparison, because obviously this dude is nowhere near the star power level as The Rock, but it was almost like Jeff Hardy in Immortal. I know a lot of people didn't like that heel character, the guy coming out smoking the cigarettes, but I thought that was some of Jeff Hardy's best work. It just got wasted in a terrible angle.
Yeah, I never minded The Rock. I mean, as you remember, it was pretty much necessitated when the crowd, especially at that SummerSlam match with Lesnar, when they were just booing The Rock, and he was coming back for a real short period of time in 2003 to do the match with Austin. It was a perfect, legitimate reason to turn him heel for that brief run. I'm sure he's always wanted to do it. And I mean, he was all in, changed the theme music, changed up a lot. He was going all in to try and be that heel character. And he was super entertaining as that character.
It still might be my favorite Rock theme song, with the Hollywood skyline and then the whisper, you smell what The Rock is cooking. That character, very, very underrated, kids. Do yourself a favor and go look at the network and look up some old Rock clips.
I always look back at that Goldberg debut, and just if things could have aligned right, if he could have signed in time and you could have done Goldberg Austin at one day earlier at that Mania, which would have turned out to be Austin's last match if you had the ability of foresight there.
Yeah.
That could have been, you do the dream match. What better way to introduce Bill Goldberg than winning the dream match of all dream matches and setting him on fire to come out of that? Hopefully, Austin would have lost that match. That to me would have been the perfect scenario, but it might have still fallen apart anyway. I mean, Goldberg had his detractors, and maybe it still would have fallen apart with the company, but that to me would have been the ideal scenario, was if they could have locked him in place by January and done him and Austin at WrestleMania that year. That would have made that WrestleMania. That would have been the biggest match on that card, no doubt.
I'll say like you could make the argument that would have been one of the biggest matches ever.
Yeah, I mean, that was a WrestleMania that did not do well on pay-per-view, and you put Goldberg and Austin on there, that's probably a 900,000 buy show at least, if not more, depending on how big it grew, because you weren't that far away from WCW at that time, where I think you would have attracted a lot of those WCW fans that maybe had given up on wrestling to come watch for that match, because that was such a big dream match at the time for that whole Attitude Era, was the Austin Goldberg dream match scenario. But it didn't happen. So anyway, and it never will happen. So Emelina promo will be premiering soon. And then Carl Anderson and Big Cass was next. Enzo came out with these pink breast cancer awareness overalls. I don't know if these are available anywhere. He does his promo. Cass says they can take their opinion and shove it. We got a John Elway reference in there by Enzo. And then Cass attacks Anderson at the bell. He goes to the floor, launches Enzo into Gallows on the floor. Cass gets crotched coming back into the ring, but then returns and hits the East River Crossing. And he pins Carl Anderson in 1 minute and 11 seconds. And Graves says he was surprised that Cass made such short work of him. I'll say. Bring on the tag match after this.
Here's the question, John, and I know you're not a WWE insider, even though I'm sure you're on great terms with Vince McMahon. But I wonder, had Balor not gotten hurt, would we have seen integration between him and the club? Because if the plan all along was for these guys to just be a tag team, separate from AJ and separate from Balor on the main roster, I don't really know if there's a whole lot of value. And that's not a slight against Anderson or Gallows, who are both capable workers. But for the money that you're paying these guys to just be in this spot like this, I don't know if you're getting your value.
It's just strange because there's a lot to be done with Anderson and Gallows. Like, God knows your tag division needs an effective heel unit together. And you seem that, okay, we had exhausted this comedy that did not work well, so they did the reset on them, and now they're doing this stuff, like just losing in a minute, where it's like these guys feel so handcuffed at the moment, they can't get any steam on them at all. And to your question about Finn Balor, I think the fact they teased that at SummerSlam, whether they were going to do it immediately or just hold off on it, I would have to think that they were going to try and transfer the chemistry that those two had with AJ to Finn on Raw, whether it be now or sometime down the road, because Anderson, Gallows, and Styles, I mean, those three just worked off each other so well that you would hope that they could get some of that on Raw with Finn Balor at some point too. Drew Gulak and Tony Nese were backstage, and they're talking to Brian Kendrick, who says to follow his lead out there in the six-man tag tonight. And Perkins walks in and calls Kendrick Sir Lancelot. Kendrick responds, calling him Game Boy, and says this is not the Cruiserweight Classic, it's Raw. There are no friends, but there are allies. And Kendrick says that Perkins knew the old Kendrick. And Perkins comes back saying, I know you better than you do. So that's some deep insight from the Cruiserweight champion. Kendrick says it's game over at Hell in a Cell, and says that Perkins thinks it's WWE 2K17, and Perkins has infinite lives, but Kendrick is on his last life and will do anything to survive. And I was waiting for Kendrick to pull out a mushroom and eat it, but instead Swan and Alexander walked in, and we have our six-man tag for later. They're going very heavy on the video game references, Nate.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that particular reference by Kendrick didn't even make sense. Because if you're playing a wrestling video game, it's not like Super Mario Brothers. It's not even like a Grand Theft Auto where you can't be killed.
It should have been a health meter reference, right?
Yeah, it's like you don't have infinite lives. And like, I don't know what's going on with this, because I think they went to it too fast to begin with. You know, this should not have been the first match that Perkins had at Night of Champions. And I think that would have been your spot for Neville. And then after that, you could start telling the story of Brian Kendrick. But because we jumped into it so quickly, I don't know if they've ever been able to catch up. And it's not to say that Kendrick is not a good performer, because I like some of the stuff he's done. It just doesn't resonate. Then you've also got the fact that how far are we into this cruiserweight experiment? 2 months? Has it been 2 months?
It's been about a month since the finals.
Okay, so yeah, we're not even 2 months in, and it already feels like this is an afterthought. You know, it's not a part of the Raw show as a whole, but it's just kind of this sideshow. We bring out the purple ropes and put the purple lights on, and we got these guys go out here and do some flippy stuff for 10 minutes. But at the end of the day, it doesn't connect to the rest of the show that you're investing all this time in. And I think that's a disservice, because there's a lot of talent in this division, but I don't know if we as viewers, you know, not us and the people listening to the show, obviously, but the viewers at large, like, do they really care about this story and these cruiserweights as a whole?
What if Kendrick cheats to win the title and he calls it Game Genie? And he steals the title without doing the proper work.
But then the ultimate match is we set up a Hell in a Cell, but instead of actual wrestling, they just set up a console and they play 2K17 in the middle of the cell.
Yeah, lots of video game fodder.
Are either of those guys in the game? I don't think they are.
I don't know, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't think TJ Perkins or Brian Kendrick are in the video game, which sucks for them.
Well, maybe sit-down interview mode is in the game, because that was what we had next. Lita with Sasha Banks. And the best way I can characterize this would be like a teacher trying to like get along with like one of the students. And they're just, you can't buy that these two would ever have this kind of a friendship or conversation like this. Sasha goes over her history in NXT with Charlotte and is going to make history at Hell in a Cell, and that they've done this together. She does respect Charlotte, but she's going to prove she's the best. She repeats, it's in Boston, her hometown. She must have said making history like 1,000 times during this interview. She says she's 100% from the back injury when Lita brings it up, but she says it in such a way that she's clearly like masking this injury from everyone. That's at least how I read it. She was very much like Trevor Bauer on Monday night saying, it's fine. Don't worry about me. Did you watch any of the game? Do you get the Trevor Bauer reference, Nate?
I did not watch any of that game.
Okay, well, here's what happened.
I was watching.
Well, Trevor Bauer is the pitcher on the Indians who was fixing a drone and was putting batteries into it, and the drone sliced his finger. This one of the starting pitchers for the Indians, and he required 10 stitches in his pinky finger. So Trevor Bauer, who was supposed to start game 2, they move him to game 3. He's got 10 stitches in his pinky finger. And per Major League Baseball guidelines, you cannot wear a bandage over top of this. So his pinky finger looks like a mess. And they give him the ball, and he starts. And by the second inning, they just show his hand, and it's dripping blood onto the mound. Like just constant dripping. And he's trying to hide it. He's wiping it onto like the ball, onto his jersey. They eventually have to come out, and they take him out of the game because his hand is a mess. And apparently some Toronto fans were cheering when he left the game. To which I say, like, why was this guy starting the game? This was crazy.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a good player management. Like you put him, you didn't put him in a situation that set him up for success.
Like, this was not a hidden injury. It was 10 stitches in his pinky finger, and his hand is just like it's bleeding away on the mound. I'm sure you will see this throughout Tuesday because it was so graphic. But this was nuts. And to my Toronto fans, like, listen, we're gonna take every advantage possible. And we still lost this game. That's even more frustrating. Lost the starting pitcher right at the beginning. Still blew it. Anyway, so that was Monday night. But yes, Sasha ended this promo by stating that she is not afraid. She's been watching Hell in a Cell matches on the WWE Network, and fear is not an option.
Okay, there's a couple things with this, John. Obviously,
the floor is yours.
Obviously, there's the Lita component, which you've already discussed, and it was worse in this one because, and I love Sasha Banks, but in terms of mic work, she's not at the level that Charlotte's at right now. In terms of knowing her character, I think Sasha's still trying to find the babyface character within this boss persona. But the other thing I was thinking about during all this build-up for this match, I've enjoyed this feud, and I think these two have fantastic chemistry. But, and I might be the only one, John, but I think this match, in terms of his history and in terms of setting the precedent, it deserves the Hell in a Cell. But just based off what we've seen on TV, it doesn't feel like it's necessary because, we don't have the Dana component anymore. The Ric Flair component is long gone. So I'd say like the last 2 or 3 matches they've had, it's been one-on-one. So why do we need a structure that keeps people out?
This plan to do these two in a Hell in a Cell, they've been talking about this for a long time. So when they did the TV match a few weeks ago, I almost thought for sure it was going to be Sasha has it won and Dana screws it up somehow. And it leads to the ultimate blow off to this feud is Sasha stating, I want one more shot at the title and then I'll never challenge you again, but I want to do it in my hometown and you've never lost at a pay-per-view and we're going to have a Hell in a Cell match, no Dana. That to me just made so much sense. And to me, the idea of Sasha chasing for the title in her hometown,
yes,
you could realistically put that match on last. Yep. I think they may, in fact, put it on last just because they are pushing this as this historical match for the women. You're still going to do that. I think it's still going to be a really strong match, and I think they're going to position it as a real historical women's match for the company. I just think that the setup of Sasha chasing could have been so much more than the current setup.
And this is the second time in this feud that they've done that because, she won at the Raw before SummerSlam.
Yeah, it was the first one after the draft that they did that blow-away match on TV. Yeah.
And like that just kind of undercut whatever big moment she could have had at SummerSlam. And then now we're doing it again here. She wins before the pay-per-view. And it feels backwards. And I still think they're going to have a great match because they always do. But I think the story's been a little uneven.
So then we got Bill Goldberg's second biggest moment, I guess, in the WWE, winning the world title at Unforgiven 2003 from Triple H in a match that I don't know if this was a highlight, Nate. Do you remember this match?
I vaguely remember the match.
Well, they had the opportunity. The month earlier, they did the Elimination Chamber match at SummerSlam, and they definitely missed the boat on the night to put that title on Goldberg because a month later, the air was out of the balloon on that Hunter feud. And it was just such a flat title change, I remember that night being. And certainly not a memorable title run either. He kept it for 3 months and then just dropped it right back to Hunter. It was very underwhelming. But that was our Goldberg walk down memory lane, Nate.
Yeah, it's almost like, if I were a conspiracy theorist, it's almost like they didn't want Goldberg to succeed and outshine their homegrown talent.
Well, up next was the 6-man. TJ Perkins, Rich Swann, and Cedric Alexander taking on Brian Kendrick, Drew Gulak, and Tony Nese. They all shook hands. Nese blocked the tornado DDT and then suplexed Perkins. Kendrick came in and Perkins went for the knee bar. Kendrick got the rope break. They went through a commercial break and Alexander landing a spinning enziguri, and they were pulling Alexander away from the corner, but he eventually tagged Swann in, who leapt from the mat, hit a Hurricane Rana to Nese. There was a springboard by Alexander taking out Gulak. Perkins hit the wrecking ball drop kick, and then Nese hit a 450 splash onto Swann. Kendrick tagged in and he applied Captain's Hook, and he got the win as Nese held Perkins from the floor. So the right finish here. Brian Kendrick, who is the challenger for the next pay-per-view, wins with his submission over Rich Swann. So I had no problem with this. The match was fine, but Nothing spectacular, I would say.
No, which could kind of describe this entire cruiserweight experiment. Like, the matches have been good. You know, there's a lot of talent, but at the end of the day, are these anything, you know, you talk about that Triple H match being memorable. Like, I don't think anybody can remember. Like, when Way gets back, ask him who won that first cruiserweight match, or what was the first cruiserweight match when they decided to start this thing on Raw, and I bet you he won't be able to remember it.
Then they had Stephanie and Mick Foley backstage. This was our first and only appearance of Mick Foley on this show. He mentioned Stephanie accepting the Survivor Series challenge without him, but he doesn't mind. And Stephanie asks what Foley has planned up his sleeve for next week's Raw. And Foley announces Kevin Owens versus Seth Rollins versus Chris Jericho in Minneapolis next week. Stephanie loves it, and they high five. And they also are going to have a non-title match with the New Day against Cesaro and Sheamus, which, based on the New Day booking, I imagine the New Day will win going into the title match at Hell in a Cell.
This is an interesting segment here, John, and I know, you know, you're a student of stand-up comedy and improv and the stagecraft game, but what am I supposed to be feeling as a viewer when I watch Stephanie McMahon on these shows week to week?
It depends which week. Some weeks you're supposed to hate her, and others you're supposed to begrudgingly like her.
Yeah, because like she had the segment earlier with Jericho and Owens, which makes it seem like they're in this big heel cabal, you know, like the Authority 2.0. But then in this segment, you know, it's all about Raw rallying the troops, and you know, we've made the challenge to Shane, and we've got some great matches coming up next week for the fans. It's like I do not know. Like, I think I know where they're going with this, but at the same time, the way she is playing the character, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel as a viewer.
Remember, like 3 weeks ago when Stephanie just tore Mick Foley apart?
Yeah.
And Mick Foley was questioning if she was involved with Triple H and the turn. Like, that's all kind of, they've just moved past it.
Now they're giving each other awkward high fives.
It's very strange. Then Michael Cole is in the ring for the final segment, and he replays the clip from ESPN with Bill Goldberg speaking with Jonathan Coachman, Heyman's challenge that was laid out last week. And then Michael Cole introduces Bill Goldberg as, quote, the greatest champion in WCW history. Nate, did that rile up some feathers?
Yeah, that was like, has this man never heard of Ric Flair? Has this man never heard of Sting? Has this man never heard of the total package Lex Luger? 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
So they show Goldberg backstage, and he's walking past. The first person jumping up and down is Bob Backlund, who is next to Darren Young.
Wow, I totally missed that.
Yeah,
I saw the New Day.
Everyone did.
I saw the
New Day was there.
I missed Darren Young.
A bunch of the guys were in the back, and they were all pretty much playing fans that were watching Bill Goldberg, and probably wasn't that removed from a lot of these performers who probably grew up as Bill Goldberg fans, as he's just storming through the back to the entrance area. And then one of my highlights of the night, wait. Before
we get to the highlight, I want to touch on this, on the backstage walk real quick.
Yep.
I thought it was cool that they had the members of the roster, well, most of them, showing enthusiasm, but it was like every fifth or sixth person that he would pass was just kind of there just chilling, like looking at their phone, or, they were unengaged from what was happening. It's like, man, where's Jim Cornette to slap people when you need him?
Xavier Woods was excited.
Woods and Big E. They were over the moon with Bill Goldberg.
Well, maybe I took their enthusiasm and just associated it with everyone.
But there was one guy in particular, I think he may have been like the Ken Bone of WWE backstage staff, because he just had this red polo on, and he was just kind of, maybe it was a Ken Bone joke, because he had a red polo on. He was just kind of looking at his phone.
It had to have been. If it was a red. I missed that guy, but if he was wearing a red pullover, it had to be a Ken Bone reference. So, that's who Ken Doane is going to come out as on SmackDown on Tuesday night. It's got to be. He's got to have red now. So then they cut to the fans in the arena, and I do mean fans, because we got a close-up of Governor John Hickenlooper chanting Goldberg. This was awesome. This guy was just so excited to see Bill Goldberg, the governor of Colorado. This was amazing. And a Democrat, no less, here on Raw, Nate. I think the WWE, despite all the donor money from the McMahon family, here they were, front and center with Democratic Governor John Hickenlooper at Raw. So he walks through the pyro, the crowd is chanting his name, and he came out, did you notice this, Nate, to his old theme?
Yes.
He came out to his old theme, but at the end of the segment, they played his WWE version.
Which was an interesting choice.
So I feel this was the only time you're going to hear the WCW version was for this one. And I don't think they wanted to tinker with this entrance. And I think they know that the original music, I mean, there was tons of criticism when they changed it in 2003 because he came out to the old theme at the start of his run and then they switched it.
Like the original music is so good. Like why would you mess with that?
It's got to be. I don't know what the issue is. I don't know if it's just strictly not wanting to pay for it, but I mean, it was used here when he came out, and he comes out, he gets into the ring. I mean, Bill Goldberg looked so legitimately moved by this reaction. He got onto the turnbuckle and just yelled, "I'm back," and this crowd just roared. This was one of the bigger reactions I can recall on a WWE broadcast in a long time. They're chanting, "Holy shit," and just like a huge reaction, Nate, before he even said anything on the mic.
You could see, like you said, John, he was legitimately getting choked up at the beginning. And it's like, man, like for all of the limitations that Bill Goldberg had as a performer, the one thing that you can't take away from the man is that he had a connection with the crowd. And it wasn't because of anything he said on the mic particularly, and it wasn't because of his in-ring work particularly. It was just some people have an aura about them, a physical charisma, maybe more so than a spoken charisma. And Goldberg still at, 50, he still has that.
Not to age him though, Nate, 49.
I've been terrible to ages all night tonight.
So he gets on the microphone. He says it's
probably because I feel like I'm 50 after watching this damn show tonight, John Pollock.
Well, this segment, I think, took you back to your youth. He said it's been a long time and the people didn't forget. And he mentions that his wife and son are here to see him live for the first time ever, and they showed them in the front row. He goes over the fact that he got a call from 2K back in January and mentioned it was his desire to be a superhero for kids, stating that there's not enough of us in the world today. And he says that there was a lot of drama created here with the WWE and said maybe it would be better left alone, and he just sticks with the video game promotion. And the crowd chanted no. And then he says Lesnar made the challenge, but he didn't have the balls to do it himself, and he got his fat stooge to do it. And says maybe he has one more ass kicking left in him. And not only, Brock Lesnar, are you next, but you're last. And he accepts the challenge. And afterwards, his music is playing. He lifted his son up and was walking around ringside with him. His wife was fighting back tears as she's watching this. And they announced that Brock Lesnar will be on Raw next week. This segment was so unbelievably great. This was one of the best segments of the year, in my opinion, and this return, this could not have been better. This was the best promo of Bill Goldberg's career. I don't even know what number 2 is, Nate. As you said, this guy was not known for his promos, and this one was awesome. It was everything it needed to be. This crowd was in love with him. The reaction was phenomenal. You could not have asked for a better segment. I love this.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. And, you talk about his promo, like there were stumbles and slip-ups, but I think that made it even better. Because
I didn't note anything like that. I just thought it was just a real genuine message that this guy had and was legitimately moved by the enormity of this reaction in Denver.
And I think that's what it was, because there was a couple points, where he kind of fumbled the video game thing, and then there was another point where he mixed up something, but it felt real. It felt that, he was getting his words a little bit jumbled because of the emotion of the situation. And, a polished promo was great, but give me something that feels real any day over that. And this certainly felt like, Bill Goldberg was feeling the emotion and the crowd was feeling him. And I really enjoyed this. I think that I still don't know how I feel about the match in particular, but I thought this was a great way to kick this thing off, at least from, the Goldberg aspect. And no disrespect, no shade to you and all the good people up there in the 6, but I'm just hoping that y'all don't find a way to shit on this man when he comes to town.
Well, I was talking about this Sunday night. I don't know if the crowd is necessarily going to be negative on Bill Goldberg. What is especially after watching this segment, what do you feel that reaction is going to be like in Toronto?
I mean, I think it'll still be split because Brock still is, arguably the most, I don't want to say charismatic, but he's certainly, the biggest attraction still in the sport. But I think this promo probably went a long way into ingratiating Goldberg to maybe some fans that were on the fence. Cause it's hard to, man, like the guy was carrying his son around. It's hard to hate on a dude that is coming back. And one of his motivations for coming back is so his son and his wife can have a chance to see him one last time in the ring, and I think that, he'll probably get a smattering of boos, but I'm hoping now after this that his reaction is not as harsh as maybe I thought it was going to be going in.
Yeah, I think the best you can hope for is like a short match that's much like that Goldberg match he had with Scott Steiner that year at Fall Brawl, where you weren't expecting much going into that, and they ended up having a pretty physical match. Yeah. And it wasn't all that long either. It was like 13 minutes. And I feel best case scenario is you just get a really high pace and the crowd just treats it like a dream match and they're just into everything. I mean, that would be your best case scenario, and just don't overstay your welcome. I don't think anyone expects them to go 20 plus minutes, and they shouldn't. This should be 11, 12 minutes, I think, tops.
Yeah, there should be, two bulls going in with the plan to destroy the other guy. And as long as, we don't get anything like the Orton finish from SummerSlam, I think the crowd is going to eat it up.
Yeah, I watched this segment. I enjoyed this segment so much that I almost don't want to see him on TV again until Survivor Series. It's like, what more do you need to do? I mean, yes, there's the face-to-face segment they'll do with Lesnar on the last Raw before Survivor Series. But, I mean, what are you going to do on that Halloween night when Goldberg is there solo without Lesnar? I mean, what do you...
I'm glad you asked the question, John, because I am a man of solutions, much like...
All right, lay it out.
Much like Brodus Clay's aborted gimmick on TNA, I'm a problem solver. So Brock Lesnar has an advocate in Paul Heyman. I think tonight, John, we found the perfect advocate for Bill Goldberg to speak in his stead when Goldberg isn't in the arena.
And who is that?
That is the governor of Colorado. I think he'd be the perfect, I am here on behalf of my friend Bill Goldberg, and that guy was great. Like, he added so much to the feel. Like, when you got a politician and somebody who is, a bit older, and he's acting like a little kid because Goldberg is here. To me, I think that just added another layer of, like, this is a cool moment for anybody that was a fan, back in that Monday Night War era.
John Hickenlooper, the unofficial star of Monday night's episode of Raw. So certainly for me, it was all about that final segment. I thought this was one of the best segments of the year. I thought it was great.
Yeah, this was a long show, John.
Yeah, I know.
And I might have to renegotiate my live audio wrestling contract when this is over. But like the opening segment with the opening match, I should say, with Rollins and Jericho was good. The Rusev segment was really good, and this closing segment was good. So it was like once an hour we got something really good to keep us from changing the channel because everything else was just kind of there.
All right. Nate, do you have to get going, or do you want to do a few pieces of feedback with me?
I guess I could stick around and do some feedback. Haven't done this in a while.
Okay, well, we're going to go to the message board, lawradio.proboards.com. We won't get to all of these. We'll just go to a few here. I'm just going to skim down. We will start with Paul from New Jersey. Really enjoyed the Strowman-Zayn angle. This is the perfect opponent for Braun, and I think these two will complement each other well. Surprised to see Dana get the victory over Bayley. I know you guys would prefer feedback to be submitted after the show, but I had my fill for tonight. 3 hours is just too much. Well, a lot of people will agree there.
Well, I'm going to skip down and show my bias and go to a frequent Review and Impact contributor, Jay Dougherty.
All right.
John from Indianapolis. Can we please have more of these go-nowhere matches featuring 6 geeks who have nothing going on in their careers doing pointless crap? I wished the seemingly never-ending Titus Darren feud hadn't ended on Superstars. That's a good point, though. Like, with all the stuff they're doing now with Titus, that Darren thing wasn't so bad. At least we had Backlund.
That's true. And now Backlund is just on the road and barely doing anything. I mean, he's on.
What was the purpose of having Backlund at the show tonight?
Probably just to tape. Is it main event they do before Raw? That's about it. That's his appearances now with Darren Young. All right, Michael from the great state of Virginia, the home of Nate Milton. First of all, as a Nationals fan who stood out in the cold till 12:45 a.m. at the ballpark last week, only to watch them lose to the Dodgers and then get sick, I offer my apologies regarding the Jays. As far as Raw goes, two things stood out to me. One was Dana beating Bayley. Is it me, or was she supposed to use the ropes for leverage? Looked like a botched finish to me. Can't imagine that made Vince too happy. Also, Goldberg. I got way more excited than I thought I would during the Pyro, and I think the spectacle at Survivor Series will be great. Really looking forward to the match and the build.
All right, let's go to MJ, the Goldberg mark from NJ. Being 10 years old in 1999, I grew up a huge Goldberg fan, and tonight's 10-year-old mark-out moment was only topped by the 2011 return of The Rock. I watch wrestling for the moments that can make me feel 10 again, and this was one of them. Question: who in 12 years outside of Cena can return and get an ovation like this, or is Goldberg one of the very last of the monumental return breed? In 2016, we checked Shane and Goldberg off the list. Who would have thought?
I mean, there's not a whole ton of names out there. Kurt Angle is probably one you could do once for that return. I don't know what kind of reaction Hogan would get coming back. Would you expect some big reaction like that, Nate?
I think it would have to depend on the town. I just
feel it would be so tacky to build it up as this like hero coming back. I think he's very much been tainted in people's eyes that I almost don't need to see it.
Well, do you think anybody out of the current crop, anybody on the current roster could get that reaction? I think maybe Cena, like he says, and Brock, but other than that, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, anyone who disappears for a long time, there's always that nostalgia. Like 10 years from now, when some of these people look back at their childhoods of Randy Orton and different top guys, I mean, you'll get that nostalgia over time because there's people who now are 11, 12 years old that these are the people they probably look at as those larger than life figures. But in the present, there aren't a whole lot of options out there. I would say Kurt Angle would be one that comes to mind for me, and that might be it.
Yeah,
to be honest,
because like he's saying, we've had Rock, we've had Goldberg, Sting to a lesser extent we've had. So yeah, in terms of guys who you haven't seen in the WWE for a while or ever, there's not really a wide variety to choose from. Not any that would make a big mark.
Okay, next one here, and then we'll wrap things up here from Kai. Let's be real here. Tonight's Raw was the Goldberg show starring Bill Goldberg, and it shows. It was pretty surreal seeing him back in the WWE ring in 12 years. Despite him botching WWE 2K17, his promo was pretty much heartfelt, and the crowd was with him every step of the way. But soon reality will hit, and we'll realize, oh shit, they gotta wrestle, don't they? He also goes on, fact, before tonight, Goldberg's last television appearance in WWE prior to WrestleMania 20 was on February the 9th, 2004 on Raw, where he accidentally speared Austin. Things of note that happened during that week. Outkast's Speaker Box / The Love Below became the first rap album to win Album of the Year at the Grammys. People were still outraged over the Justin Timberlake Janet Jackson Super Bowl halftime wardrobe malfunction, and top movies in the theaters were Barbershop 2, Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, and The Butterfly Effect.
Featuring frequent Raw contributor Ashton Kutcher.
That's right, The Butterfly Effect. All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for us. We have gone late tonight, so I want to very much thank you, Mr. Milton, for joining us. And, of course, you can follow Nate and Brian Mann during the campaign trail leading up to November the 8th. Or as Alec Baldwin would classify it, November the 35th, when the election takes place on Review America, which is up at liveaudiowrestling.com. And Nate, you also have another show in the works for Luke Cage fans.
Yes, first of all, thanks for having me on, John. Even though the show was torture for most of the night. It's fun talking to you again, man. It's been too long. But in addition to my already full slate of podcasts featuring the Kings of Sport and Review America, I decided to add another one to my plate. Why else not? I got to lose? Why not? As Donald Trump said, well, what else you got to lose? But yeah, I'm going to do a Luke Cage review show starting on October 25th, going through the Netflix Luke Cage series. And for fans of the old Keep It 100 show, it's going to be a familiar format because each week me and my co-host, Efren Guzman, are going to set up the show and review the episode. And then we're going to bring on a guest that has something to do with a particular element of the show, whether that be the music or, the origins of superheroes or, Harlem as a character. So we're just going to have some fun and go in depth with the series because I really enjoyed it. It's part of the reason why I don't mind putting extra work on my plate because I really enjoyed the show and I hope more people check it out. Out of all the Marvel shows, I would say Daredevil season 2 is probably the only one I have above it right now. But to me, Luke Cage was a strong first season. So, check out that show. And then the show I've got coming out on the 25th is called Always Forward. And you can find us on Twitter at AF Cagecast. And that's AF Cagecast because Cagecast was taken by a Nicolas Cage podcast. So I had to throw the AF in front of it.
Unbelievable. So you can look out for that. That is the next series on my list. So Nate, I will be following along with the podcast.
And it's good. We're making the show specifically for people that are kind of late to the party, quote unquote, because each week we're going to go by a specific episode and we're not going to spoil what happens next, even though me and my co-host have seen the full series like at least twice a piece. So
wow,
it'll be a good companion piece for folks that kind of want to get into the show and find out some backstory and kind of get into the world of this character that really was a cult character. If this was the WWE, it'd be like somebody took Neville and actually booked him properly and made him a star. So they took a mid-carder, and I think they're getting close to making him a main eventer.
All right, and the final thing before we go here, I forgot about this. We're doing a trivia contest, and the winner is going to get a copy of the new Brock Lesnar Eat, Sleep, Conquer, Repeat DVD and the SummerSlam 2016 DVD. They're both out now, and all you have to do is send us a answer to the following trivia question, and we'll announce the winner on Review-A-Smackdown on Wednesday. So you can tweet us at Law Radio with the answer, and the question is, who was the governor of Colorado that attended Raw on Monday night? So send us your tweets at Law Radio and with the trivia answer, and you will be in a draw to win those DVDs, and we will announce the winner on Wednesday's Review-A-Smackdown, which will have another mystery reviewer. So all your shows are up at liveaudiowrestling.com. We have the Law from Sunday night that's up. The entire Cody Rhodes interview, which is 30 minutes and really worth checking out. That will be up on Tuesday as well. And again, you can follow Nate at N8 MOZ AIK. And Nate, this was a ton of fun. I always like doing shows with you. So thanks a lot for sacrificing your Monday night to chat about Raw. And at least you got a good segment at the end with Bill Goldberg.
Yes, no problem, Brother Pollock. It was fun. I appreciate you making me the first draft pick of the...
I had to start big.
I feel like Seth Rollins only with better material. So we'll have to do it again sometime.
All right. That's it for myself and Nate freaking Milton.